Morning, Fort Church. So apparently some of y'all really need to hear about Fortify because we watched it twice. So go ahead and start marking your calendars and getting ready to be a part of that experience. It's a wonderful time. I'm not saying that just because Matt asked me to come and be there with y'all. So, you mark it on your calendar. It's going to be great. For those of y'all who don't really know me yet, my wife and I, my wife, 3 years, she loves when people look at her. She's the redhead sitting right there. She's our introvert. I'm the extrovert, so I don't mind getting up here. Whereas, all of y'all just looking at her, she just went into, anxiety shock and is, going to get on to me later. But it's all cool. But we've been married for 3 years. It's been an amazing 3 years. We have had the opportunity to do so much for the Lord. He's had us actually move 3 times to serve him in different capacities. We've lived in Alabama and worked with student ministry there. We've had the opportunity to move to a Muslim country and work with students there. And if you've ever had an entire ministry organization that's built around having nothing but Muslims in it, it's quite a unique experience. They don't quite understand the same things as the student ministry in Alabama. I don't know what it is about going from the Bible Belt to a Muslim countries, but the idioms don't really transfer over. They don't understand terms like there's a bump on a log. Don't just sit there like that. The metaphors don't really translate. But God blessed us through that time. And now he's called us back to being a part of this awesome church. God's called us to be a part of this church, serving our young adults and working in different capacities, leading small groups and having them in our home. And both of us are currently enrolled in school. That's one of the reasons I'm so excited about being up here. I'm actually working through seminary, getting my seminary degree right now, which has just been a wonderful experience. And God's blessing me and allowing me to learn so much through that. At the end of last year, Matt came to me and he said, with the merger of these 2 church campuses, I'm going to need some help, doing this week in, week out. And by the way, this ain't easy. This going from one campus to the other, y'all should really give them a round of applause right now. I can tell you just today, just in the little bit of interaction that I had today, of getting in the car after giving everything I had in one sermon and then going, oh, now I have to go do it again. This ain't easy. You pour out everything you have in one service, and then next thing you know, you're in a car, and you're like, oh, I need to go get out of the car and do this all over again. I don't know how Garrett, the band, and Matt do it. We truly have an amazing staff here at the Fort. The way they get things done is truly amazing. They take God's blessings and send it back out, and it has truly been a blessing to each and every one of us. But Matt came to me and he said, I want you to be a part of our preaching, teaching team. And I thought, well, that's an honor. That's so wonderful to be able to get up and share God's word with people, just being able to preach God's word with people. And so as a seminary student, your mind starts racing and I start thinking, what's he going to ask me to preach on? Is he going to ask me to explain, deep thoughts of the Trinity? Is he going to ask me to take him to the cross in Gethsemane and talk about, the biblical exploitations of Paul's letters to, the different churches? Am I going to have the opportunity to, decipher dreams in the Old Testament? And Matt goes, I want you to preach on hospitality. I was like, well, that's kind of a downer. As a seminary student who's looking through books every single week and reading through all these massive, manuscripts and learning all these things, you're kind of like, well, that doesn't really sound exciting. But then you start diving into what true biblical hospitality is, and your mind starts opening up to so many new things. And you start realizing that hospitality, that being a person who is a hospitable person, means being a person who makes room in their life for others and the gospel, which is a lot different than what you may consider a hospitable person in Southern culture. It's a lot different than what I really had in mind when I first started on this. When I first thought about this, I thought, I'm a hospitable person. We have our 40-cup coffee maker for our young adult small group, and they kill it every single week. We have desserts for them. We have donuts. We make sure that there's something for them every single week so that when they come into our apartment, they're feeling like they're loved. And I thought, this is all this is. Like, I can talk about baking a cake. I mean, if that's what he really wants me to do, I can pretend to be hospitable like that. But there's so much more to what being a hospitable person is. There's so much more than just being a person that's got an open home. Being a hospitable person stretches out into every aspect of our lives. So today I want to invite you to turn with me in Proverbs 23. If you don't have a Bible or you need a Bible, there should be one right there in the pew in front of you. There's just something amazing about actually reading the words for yourself. But we're going to be in Proverbs 23. And we're going to have our jumping off point in verse 4 and verse 5. And it says, "Do not wear yourself out to get rich. Do not trust your own cleverness. Cast but a glance at riches, and they are gone. For they will surely sprout wings and fly off to the sky like an eagle." See, when it comes to hospitality, there's nothing about the house even in these verses. In these verses, there's nothing about, being a person that has an open door policy. But yet, there's so much in these verses that Solomon's giving us warning to. Solomon's casting this warning to us. See, hospitality only exists in the places that we allow it to exist. It only exists in the places that we're willing to let go of control, the places that we're willing to let go of and say, "God, take this." Solomon, being one of the wisest men that ever lived, is giving us this warning that what you have here could be gone like that. The things that you've strived for, the things that you've worked for, the things that you hold dear to your life here could be gone like that. Your car that you enjoy, you've got a car that you enjoy. Maybe it's not the best car, but it's a car that gets you from point A to point B. It can be gone like that. Learned that 2 years ago. I had an awesome Dodge Ram that I had driven since the time I was 16. Driven it for almost 10 years. And I loved my Ram. And it was not a good truck, but it was my truck. The radiator was busted. It still had manual locks. And I knew what rolling up and rolling down the window meant. But I loved my truck. And I learned a lesson on US 80 over in Alabama that my truck could be gone like that. A lady who had no rear brake lights tried to turn right and didn't use her indicator, and I smashed right into the back of her. My truck was gone. Is God calling? That's awesome. I'm just kidding. But we can lose things just like that. Our homes, they're awesome. Whether you have an apartment, whether you have a studio rental, whether you have the largest house in Muskogee County, it can be gone like that. We have a friend who literally they were just sitting in their house and lightning struck it. Went up in flames like that. The wife's grabbing all the important valuables, the wedding pictures, the baby stuff, and she's running out the door. And the husband grabs his Xbox and runs behind her. The things that we hold valuable can be gone like that. Even things like our health. It doesn't take much for some fluky thing to occur and your health is gone. Many of us remember Evan Henson a couple years back. Guy who was super in shape, did CrossFit. And we all know if you do CrossFit, you let everyone know that you do CrossFit. It's like one of the rules of CrossFit. But he did CrossFit, super in shape guy. Dropped like that. Dropped into a coma. He's been healed. But his health was gone. Just like that. There are other things that we hold on to. Maybe it's your job. Maybe you're somebody that your job title is what you hold most near and dear to your heart. Maybe you love being able to look at somebody and go, "Hi, I'm the manager of blah, 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 blah." Or "I'm the VP of this," or "I manage that," or "I'm over this many people." All it takes is one split second, one wrong decision, one wrong period in an accounting book, and everything can end. Jesus reiterates this in his first sermon, the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 9. For those of y'all who don't know what the Sermon on the Mount is, it's truly just Jesus' first real theological discussion with people, where he comes out and he hits them with all these knowledge bombs left and right. And he's telling them all these amazing things that nobody had really heard before. But that's because Jesus was both man and God, and he's telling us things not of this world, but things of eternity. And he gets to chapter 6 of Matthew, and verse 19 says, "Do not store up your treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy, and where thieves break in and steal." He's just reiterating what Solomon's already said. Don't put your value in the stuff of today. This stuff will be gone. And a lot of you are thinking, well, that's never going to happen to me. I'm trying to follow God. Some of you, that's your thought going through your mind right now. That's not going to happen to me. I'm trying to follow God, and surely God would not do that to me. Well, it does not take much to find people in the Bible that were following God, and God took things away from them so that he could be glorified. There's an entire book called Job, where Job is picked out by God for Satan to test. He says, you can take everything good from him. You can take everything from him, and I promise you, he will not sit down and curse me. Job gets to the point that he's lost everyone in his family but his wife, which there's a whole nother message about finding the right spouse when it comes to the fact that he lost everything good and his wife was still there. There's a whole nother message in that. What we see here, though, is he loses everything. Everything. He's literally sitting on the ground with boils on his skin, scratching them with clay pots just to relieve the pain. His health is gone. His house is gone. His children are gone. Everything that you could possibly hold dear in your heart is gone. And yet Job says, no, I will not curse God. God has a purpose for this. You turn to Genesis, just last month, Matt led us through a series on Joseph. Everything that Joseph touched was blessed. Joseph was his father's favorite son. He was blessed with this coat of many colors, as many of you have heard it, or the Technicolor Dream Coat for those of you who are from the 80s and 90s and 70s. But he's blessed. He's his father's favorite son. And yet he's thrown into a well and sold off into slavery. In slavery, he's promoted to the head of the house. He's promoted to the man who's overseeing everything for a guy who's second in command to Pharaoh himself. He's entrusted with all this, but because of a woman with lust, he's thrown into jail. Over and over again, we see Joseph have things blessed under him and has it all stripped away. Not because he did anything wrong, but because he was following God, and he said, God, I will bring you the glory for everything that happens. I'm not going to fall away. I'm going to follow you. There's nothing wrong with having stuff. Jesus is giving us a warning that, we're supposed to not build our own kingdoms here. We're not supposed to, overly worry about the stuff here. But there's nothing wrong with having stuff. If you have the capability of buying a big house, buy a big house. If you have the ability to buy a nice car, buy a nice car. If you're called to buy a Lamborghini, buy a Lamborghini. The only sin in owning a Lamborghini is when you don't give Carter a ride. Just a joke. No, see, the problem comes in and our sin comes in when our quest to have these things, our quest to own all these things gets in the way and blocks people out from the gospel. When we get so focused on things that we forget to look at the people around us. And we start blocking people out. And when this happens in all sorts of ways that we don't even think about. We don't even realize when we're blocking people out sometimes. Visitors in church love to sit on the back 4 rows. It's just truth. Studies have proven it. Lifeway has done studies on it. I'm not calling you people out in the back rows. Don't worry about it. I'm just pointing this out. But yet, when you go into churches, especially Baptist churches, they tend to have this term called back row Baptists, where people love to sit on the back rows because it's the furthest point away from the pastor and they can slip out whenever they want to. But people love sitting on the back rows so they can see people interact with God. They want to see how you're responding to the gospel. They want to see you worship. They want to see if God's pulling on your heart. Or if you're just standing there with your cup of coffee or your arms crossed, not singing the words. They want to see that you're impacted by the things that you come here for. That's why they like sitting on the back 4 rows. We block people out with the people we hang out with. One of my best friends, his name's Ben. If he called me tomorrow and he was in town, he said, let's go get lunch, I would pretty much drop everything and go get lunch with him. He's just one of those people that when you're around, you feel energy from him. Like you always walk away feeling a lot better about who you are. But if I only hang out with Ben, who's already a believer, that's not doing anything for anybody else. See, a lot of Christians get stuck in these holy huddles where they're like, no, these are my friends. This is my friend group. These are the people I'm going to hang out with. These are the places I'm going to go with them. And we start blocking people out of the gospel. And it's not intentional, but it's one of those things that we have to be ever conscious about is who am I putting my time into? Where am I putting my time? What kind of things am I doing? Maybe it's the trips you go on. Maybe it's the places you go. Did you know there was a statistic put out last year that 76% of people who go to church have never been on a mission trip? Like, that's crazy to think about. But yet, they're going to make sure that they get their beach trip, their mountain trip, they're going to go to Callaway Gardens. But yet, for some reason, they can't find it in their schedule or in their checkbook to make time to go and build houses or paint walls or whatever it may be that God's calling them to do. Maybe it's time to go into a backyard Bible club somewhere else. See, it's not just about the local stuff. That we're called to be doing things. Some of the most reviving time in my Christian walk is not when I'm just doing local missions. It's when I step back and I'm doing something somewhere else and I realize, wow, there's so much more to this. Realizing just how many lost people there are. One of the most humbling times in my time overseas was not talking to my students, but it was a day I was walking across town. And I was by myself, and I get to the middle of town, and the call to prayer goes out, which, for those of y'all who don't know, in Islam, they have 5 times a day, they send out a call to prayer. And everybody is to stop what they're doing and pray during that time. Well, on Fridays, it's like their Sunday. It's the day they go to their worship center. So they go to the mosque on Fridays. And it's 12 o'clock on a Friday, and I'm walking across town. And I come to the middle of town, and the call to prayer goes off. The mosque is filled. The yard is filled. the streets are overflowing with the number of people who are trying to get in this mosque. And we're not talking some small building. We're talking a massive structure. And my heart just starts breaking because I realize how many times I've just not talked to people. They're searching for something. They know there's something else out there. C.S. Lewis, who is a famous author, used to be a professor at Oxford. Many of you know him from the Chronicles of Narnia, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe type stuff. He wrote an entire essay about how there must be something beyond where we are because our souls yearn for it. And what the whole premise behind it is if you have this desire to be somewhere, fish have a desire to be in water, right? You take them out of water, they naturally want to get back in the water. You know, you try and tie up a bird's wings, he's still going to try and jump off of whatever he's on and flap his wings. We have a desire for something more than ourselves. By using the transitive property, there must be something bigger than ourselves. And we're all searching for it. Your neighbor's searching for it. Your coworker's searching for it. The person who's, maybe another religion next door to you is searching for it. But we've gotten so busy looking at trying to make sure that our comforts are found. We overlook our calendars. We're people who fill them up with things that are menial instead of actually filling them up with things that are of the gospel. Take a look at your calendar and see how much time is in there to maybe go get coffee with somebody who's a younger believer. See how much time is in your schedule to invite somebody into your home for dinner who maybe they don't know the gospel. Maybe there's a brother in Christ who needs encouragement, but because you filled up your schedule so much, they're just lost. There have been 2 suicides in our area in the last 2 weeks, and both of them were believers. That should rock you at your core, Christians. The fact that there are people who have the same hope in them, should have the same hope in them, that are getting so discouraged that they think the only way out is either through a bullet or through a bottle. But yet we turn our backs on them because we fill our schedules to the brim. Maybe we need to start reevaluating the way we do things. There's one thing that international missionaries constantly are appalled by the American church when they come home. They come in and they watch us, and you would think that when they come into our facilities, they would be in awe of the number of people and, the openness of worship and the way we do things. You would think they would just be amazed by what we've got going on. But yet they're appalled at the way we respond. I was listening to a sermon from our SBC president, J.D. Greer, a couple weeks ago. And in the sermon, he talks about a missionary in Southeast Asia who's in a predominantly Muslim country. And the pastor looks at his congregation, his large congregation in Southeast Asia of 12, and he looks at them and he says, I want you to pull out a piece of paper. I want you to write down 3 names of people that need the gospel. And so while looking at those 3 names, I want you to pick out the one that's least likely to report you to the police and have you killed. Think about that. We leave here and we're worried about how awkward the gospel presentation is going to be to other people. We're worried about sharing it with our coworkers. It's going to get awkward. But yet there are Christians around the world who are having to decide, who do I share this with so that I can still be alive to share it with others? We block people out on such a regular basis. in 1 Kings chapter 10, there's a story of the Queen of Sheba. And she hears about all the amazing things that are going on in the nation of Israel. And so, okay, cool. So she shows up. Not used to that. That's cool. So she shows up in Israel. And she wants to know what's going on. She wants to know how this is going on. She wants to know what's going on with the people. How are they being blessed? Solomon has constructed this temple. Solomon has built this temple that it has 3 layers. It starts from the innermost point, which is the Holy of Holies. It's the point where the Ark of the Covenant is. It's where the sacrifices occur. Outside of that, you had the court of Israelites. And in the court of Israelites, this is where God's chosen people came to worship him. They would pray to him. They would lift up their prayers to him. And then the 3rd layer was the court of Gentiles. It was there so that people who were not Israelites could come in and see God's people interact with him. The Queen of Sheba comes and she sees the same King Solomon interacting with God. The same one who writes in Proverbs, the same one who's been writing all these Proverbs for us, the same wise king. She sees him interacting with God and she realizes this is the true God. And she takes it back to her people. And there are people who find out about who God truly is. I'm like, okay, well, this seems really random. Why are you bringing this up? In the New Testament, we find another story about the court of Gentiles. It's Passover time, the time of sacrifices. And Jesus goes into the temple and he finds people selling sacrifices. He finds people making themselves a little bit closer to the Holy of Holies. They're making it easier on themselves to be able to get closer to God. They've taken over the space of the court of Gentiles so that they can be comforted. They don't have to go as far with their sacrifice. Their sacrifice becomes easier. So we've all laughed at the joke about what would Jesus do. Remember that turning over tables and hitting people with whips is an option. What Jesus is doing at this point is he's running the money changers out of there, not because they're selling things, but because they're stopping people from coming to God. That's where we come up short. That's where we find ourselves in trouble, is not in the quest for the things. It's in blocking people out from being able to see who God is. In 1 John chapter 3, verse 16, it says, "This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. If anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need, but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and in truth." See, we forget about the things that Jesus has commanded us to do. We've stopped making space in our lives so that the gospel and others can come in. We've filled our lives with so much junk that we've forgotten there are people dying and going to hell. That truth is still real today. It's no different from the time that Paul wrote this. It's no different from what Paul told them about having a sense of urgency about sharing the gospel. We have forgotten Colossians 3:17, where he tells us whether in word or deed, do it unto the glory of God. Are the actions you take, is your checkbook, your calendar, your home, is it being leveraged for the gospel? Or is it there for you to feel comfortable when you need it? Where are you in your walk with Christ? God calls us to do crazy things. God calls us to step out and do things that we've never done before. I'm going to brag on my small group for just a minute. And at the other service, I cried through this. I'm going to try not to do it this time because I know that we're running out of time. Justin's playing, and it's awesome up here, and the Spirit's moving. But I'm going to try not to cry this time. Our small group, it's already happening. This is awesome. Okay, so our small group started at the beginning of school. Since then, we've seen them help with CSU Move-In Day, disaster relief for hurricanes, visit nursing homes to make, just to cheer up little old people. We've packed OCC shoe boxes. They've invited people to church. They've served at Ark in the Park. And yesterday, we even had a group go to the Georgia Baptist Children's Home and paint rooms and stuff boxes for children that have been removed from their families. But what the best thing about my small group is? Many of them are sharing the gospel for the first time in their life. And that doesn't happen by accident. That doesn't happen because I'm a good small group leader. It probably happens in spite of me. Because I know I fall short of that day after day of sharing the gospel like I should. But that happens because people get excited about what God did for them. Lord, lead us. They're making space for the gospel in their lives. They're making space for others to feel the love of Christ. They're going that extra mile to make sure that they're not blocking people out. They're an awesome group of people and they love the Lord. But they realize that the gospel is not going to get to people unless they go out and tell them. It's great that we come together and worship. I love seeing you people on Sunday. It is awesome to hear you lift your voices. But if we're going to call ourselves followers of God, we must go and preach the gospel to the nations. We must go and make disciples of all nations, baptized in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, so that they can learn who God truly is. It's awesome to hear that 1.7 billion people proclaim to know who Jesus is. It is sad that 6.5 billion people are lost and going to go to hell if Jesus came back right this second. And that should be humbling, not just for our staff and our people who are active, like serving with God. That should be humbling for you who come here and proclaim that you are a Christian and then walk out the door and forget what God has called you to do. I don't mean to sound like I'm getting mad at you right now because I fall just as short as you do. But what it does mean is God's got something for your life. God's got a plan for you, and being a person of hospitality means that you are going to drop everything. You're going to put it all on the table and say, God, I don't know what my life holds, but I trust that you're going to take this stuff. You're going to take my car, you're going to take my house, you're going to take my life, you're going to take my health, and you're going to use it in the manner that you get the most glory. Not that I'm the one who gets praised at the end of the day. One of my favorite stories in all the Bible is found in Judges chapter 3, verse 30. And it's this guy named Shamgar. And I guarantee you, unless you've been in one of my Bible studies before, you have no idea who Shamgar is. And the verse goes like this: After Ehud came Shamgar, son of Anath. He killed 300 Philistines with an ox goad. He too saved Israel. And you're like, Carter, that sounds like the strangest verse to have a person that you love in the Bible. You know why I love that verse? Because Shamgar did one thing that God called him to do. And for all eternity, he saved Israel. He saved the people of God because he knew that God was calling him to do something. And he stepped out on that ledge and he said, God, if you're calling me to do this, you're going to make a way for it to happen. So today, as we wrap up our service, it's time for some deep reflection on where you're at. Where your soul is at. where you've put your desires, where you put your love, where you put your trust, where you put your comforts. Are you making time for God to interact with you and others? Are you somebody who has room in your life for God to move? Or are you treating this like a hostage negotiation where it's like, God, I will follow you, but don't take my ball games. Don't take Saturdays in the fall. I'll give you every other day of the week. No, that's not what God's called us for. And trust me, I've been just as guilty as anybody else. I am a huge Georgia Bulldogs fan, and I get disappointed every fall when they lose. But God hasn't said, I want you 99% of the time. I love my wife dearly. But if I only loved her 99% of the time, I'd be 100% divorced. That's just the way marriage works. And God says you are going to become one with me. I'm going to live inside of you, and you are to rely on me. Have you done that today? Have you put that stuff on the table? Have you made that decision to follow Christ in all of your actions? If not, make that move today. Make that change today. Go that extra step today. Say, God, here's my life. Use it as you will. Lord, I'm tired of running a race that I know I'm not going anywhere. Maybe for some of you today, God's tugging on your heart going, well, I'm ready for you to move. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Now you're talking about me uprooting my life and moving somewhere. Trust me, it is the scariest thing when God calls you to go somewhere else. I had never left this country before God called me to go to a Muslim country and live. It's a scary thing. And it doesn't make your parents feel much better when you and your wife show up and go, hey, we're moving to Bosnia. God's called us to. But God calls us to do crazy things each and every day. The question is, are you ready to follow him? Am I ready to follow him? Am I ready to stop this hostage negotiation and just become a servant of the true living God? Am I ready for that true salvation and that peace and that joy that only comes through following Christ? If not, make that change today. As we pick up the offering, I'll be up here. Come and talk to me. Come and pray with me. Come make a change today. For those of you who are already believers, maybe during this last song, it's time for you to make a change. You know, I invite you to sing, but maybe there's something on your heart that God's been laying there for some time, and you just need to take it to him and say, God, I'm done with this. I'm done with playing this game. I'm just giving it to you. You take it. You know much better than I do. Do that during this last song. Don't worry about the people around you. Don't worry about praying for too long. Don't worry about anything other than your relationship with God right now. Lord, I just lift up this time. I lift up these people. I lift up just this church, Lord. Well, these are some awesome individuals. And they are even more awesome together. Lord, just allow this moment to be one that changes eternities, not just for the people in this room, but people in our community. Maybe somebody in here is being called to be a missionary overseas. Lay that on their heart right now and allow them to share that with somebody. Allow this to be a mission-driven church where people just love you and they want others to know about you. Lord, give us the bravery to move at this time. Let us not be ashamed of our actions, but let us do actions that we remember forever. Father, I ask these things in your name. Amen.
Thank you for watching today. We hope you were ministered to by the message. To keep up with all things that God's doing through the Fort Church, visit our website, fortchurch.org. Follow our social media outlets such as Facebook and Instagram. You can also support the ministry by giving online at fortchurch.org/give.